The first thing I heard was the soft click of the deadbolt turning, even though I knew I'd locked it before going to bed. I sat up fast, heart thumping, because my wife had told me earlier she'd lost her key somewhere between work and the grocery store. She'd sounded flustered when she explained it, rubbing her forehead and promising she'd look for it again. I believed her. Of course I had. You don't question something that small when you love someone. But now someone was letting themselves into our house with a key she claimed she didn't have. I stepped out of the bedroom as quietly as I could. The hallway floor always creaked near the edge, so I hugged the wall to avoid giving myself away. The living room was dark except for the faint glow from the streetlight outside. I watched the doorknob turn, slow and confident, like whoever stood on the other side felt completely at home. When the door opened, a man stepped in. He didn't look surprised to see the place. He didn't hesitate. He walked straight inside, swinging the door shut behind him with one hand while dropping a backpack onto the floor with the other. He moved like someone who'd done this before. For a second I couldn't breathe. My mind felt split in two, one part screaming at me to step into the light and confront him, the other whispering that maybe I'd misunderstood everything. Maybe this wasn't what it looked like. Maybe there was some explanation, something I didn't know. But when he turned his head toward the hallway, the quiet confidence in his face wasn't the expression of a stranger who'd made a mistake. It was the look of someone who expected to see her. Someone who thought he belonged here. "Sarah," he said softly. My stomach dropped so fast that I reached out to steady myself against the wall. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried enough warmth to make my skin go cold. He wasn't calling for me. He was calling for her. I stepped out slowly. "She's not here." He jerked at the sound of my voice, then froze when he saw me. His eyes widened and his whole posture shifted, like he was preparing for something to go wrong. But there was one thing he didn't do. He didn't apologize. He didn't say he was in the wrong house. He didn't even look confused. "Oh," he murmured. "You must be Daniel." My name in his mouth felt like a slap. "Who are you? And why do you have a key to my house?" He opened his mouth like he was about to answer, then shut it again. He looked toward the hallway, toward the bedroom where Sarah should have been asleep. It took everything in me not to close the space between us. "I think she meant to tell you," he said quietly. My hands curled into fists. "Tell me what?" He sighed through his nose. "Not guilty. Not embarrassed. Just tired. This isn't how she wanted you to find out." His words didn't sound like guesses. They sounded like facts he'd been told. I didn't move. The air between us felt too heavy to breathe. And then, before I could say anything else, he stepped back and reached for the door handle. "I should go." "No," I said, stepping forward. "You're not leaving until you explain why you're walking into my house with my wife's key." He looked me straight in the eye. "Then wait for her. It's her story to tell, not mine." He slipped out before I could stop him, and the lock clicked back into place, sealing in the silence he'd left behind. I stood there staring at the door, waiting for the sound of his footsteps fading away, waiting for the moment when shock would settle into something I could actually understand. But all I felt was this rising, suffocating pressure in my chest. She had said she'd lost her key. She had said it 3 times, in fact, once in the morning, once when she got home from work, and once before bed. And each time she'd sounded a little more frustrated, like she hated being careless, like she was embarrassed by it. Now I knew she wasn't embarrassed. She was lying. I stayed standing there for a minute, forcing myself to breathe slowly, telling myself not to jump to conclusions. People have reasons for things. Things get messy. Life isn't as clean as you expect it to be. But even as I tried to convince myself of all those things, I knew something had shifted in me. I knew I'd seen something I wasn't meant to see. And once you see something like that, you can't unsee it. When Sarah came home a couple of hours later, she walked through the door like nothing was wrong. She was humming under her breath and carrying a paper bag with takeout, her hair still damp from the rain outside. When she saw me standing in the hallway, she smiled like she was happy to see me. "What are you doing up?" she asked. I waited for her to lock the door behind her. She didn't. She didn't even glance at it. "We need to talk," I said. She raised an eyebrow but didn't look nervous. "About what?" I kept my eyes on her face. "A man used your key to come inside tonight." Her expression stayed open for a split second longer than it should have. Then it tightened. What man? She asked, voice steady but too quick. You tell me. She looked away for the first time. Daniel. Don't lie to me, I said softly, because if I raised my voice I knew I would lose control. She looked down at the floor like she was searching for the right arrangement of words. It's not what you think. I felt a bitter taste rise in my throat. Then please tell me what I'm thinking. She put the bag on the counter and rubbed her hands together, the way she did when she was nervous. I was going to talk to you about this. I didn't know how. You could start by telling me who he is. She hesitated again. A long painful pause. Then she whispered. His name is Mark. The name landed heavily. Not familiar, not new. Just real. And why does Mark have a key to our house? She didn't answer. And that silence said everything. Part 2. The room felt smaller with every second she didn't speak. I leaned against the wall because my legs suddenly felt unsteady. Sarah finally lifted her head and met my eyes, but the look she gave me wasn't defensive or angry. It was almost apologetic, and somehow that hurt even worse. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, she said. That's not an answer. She swallowed hard. I know. I rubbed my forehead, trying to hold myself together. How long? Her lips pressed into a thin line. Her silence stretched until it became an answer. How long? I repeated. She blinked slowly. A few months. The words knocked the air out of me. I felt like I'd been punched somewhere deep in the chest, a place I didn't even know existed until it ached like this. I turned away because if I kept looking at her I might break in a way I couldn't come back from. I walked to the other side of the room, staring at the blank wall like it might explain something. Why him? I asked. Why anyone? She didn't rush to speak. I wasn't looking for it, she said quietly. It just happened. You don't accidentally give someone a key to your house, I said, my voice shaking. You don't just happen your way into that. She flinched a little. He helped me with some things. I was going through a rough time and you didn't tell me you were going through a rough time. I didn't want to make you worry. I laughed under my breath. Not because anything was funny, but because the answer was so painfully upside down. So instead you let me live in this house with no idea you were giving someone else the pieces of your life instead of me. It wasn't like that. Then explain it, I said. Explain something. Anything. She opened and closed her hands like she needed to hold on to something solid. He listened, she whispered. I know that sounds small, but it didn't feel small to me. Not at the time. Those words cut deeper than anything else she'd said. It wasn't the betrayal itself. It was what it implied about me. About us. So you gave him access to our home, I said. To our life. I didn't mean for him to use it without telling me, she said, voice trembling. That wasn't part of it. That wasn't part of it, I repeated. Sarah, do you even hear yourself right now? She wiped at her eyes, but no tears fell. Her face looked tight with guilt, not defensive, not angry, just tired in a way I'd never seen before. Daniel, I'm sorry, she said. I didn't want you to find out like this. I stared at her, my chest tightening. There's no good way to find out your partner isn't your partner anymore. She didn't argue. I walked past her and pulled out a chair, lowering myself into it because the weight in my body made it hard to stay standing. I felt like I was sinking into something thick and dark. Do you love him? I asked, even though part of me didn't want the answer. Sarah leaned against the counter, her arms folded across her stomach like she needed to keep herself from falling apart. I don't know, she said. I don't think so. It wasn't about that. What was it about? She closed her eyes for a moment. Feeling seen. Feeling important. I didn't realize how much I'd missed that. The space between us felt tight, like the air itself was waiting for her to say something that would make sense of the pieces scattered across the floor of our night. She kept her distance, but her eyes stayed fixed on me, soft with guilt that didn't ease a thing. I braced a hand against the doorway because something inside me had gone unsteady in a way I couldn't hide. I never planned any of this, she said quietly. That's not what I asked. She swallowed, almost flinching at how flat my voice sounded. I know. I'm trying. I pushed a breath out through my teeth. Then try harder. How long has this been happening? Her lips tightened, and the pause that followed stretched thin enough to snap. She didn't speak right away. And that silence hurt almost as much as the truth she was avoiding. When she finally answered, her voice was barely there. A few months. The words hit harder than I was prepared for. It felt like someone reached inside my chest and twisted something vital, knocking the wind out of me. I turned away before the emotion in my face betrayed me more than I wanted it to. I walked toward the far corner of the room, my hand dragging along the wall just to feel something solid. Why him? I asked. Why anyone? Why this? She let her arms fall to her sides. I didn't start out looking for another person. It just began small, and I didn't pull away soon enough. You don't accidentally hand someone a key to your home, I said, my voice trembling in a way I hated. That's not something people fall into. She winced, then stepped back like she couldn't find a safe place to stand. He helped me through some things. I've been struggling more than you realized, and he was around in the moments when I felt. You didn't tell me you were struggling, I said. You didn't say a word. She rubbed her palms together, restless. I didn't want to add more to your plate. I didn't want to weigh you down. A bitter sound slipped out of me, half laugh, half disbelief. So instead of trusting me, you trusted someone else with pieces of your life that were supposed to be mine to hold? It wasn't like that, she whispered. Then explain what it was. She leaned against the counter, looking as if she needed something to anchor her. He listened, she said after a long moment. He paid attention. He made me feel like my worries weren't ridiculous, and I didn't realize how much I missed feeling noticed. Her voice cracked slightly at the end, and the simplicity of her confession carried a sting nothing dramatic could have matched. It wasn't some wild reason. It was quiet, familiar, human, and that made it hurt even more. You could have come to me, I said. You should have come to me. I know, she whispered. I know I should have, but I didn't. And that's something I can't undo. The clock on the wall started to feel louder than it had any right to be, marking each second that neither of us knew how to fill. I stared at the pattern in the wood flooring, tracing the grain with my eyes because focusing on anything else felt like it would break me open. I thought back over the past months. The nights she came home distracted, the way she lingered on her phone just a little longer than usual, the excuses that didn't raise alarms because I trusted her without thinking twice. All those small signs that felt so harmless at the time now rearranged themselves into something painfully obvious. I hadn't seen what was slipping away. Or maybe I had and I just didn't want to admit it. She shifted her weight and spoke again, her voice barely above a breath. What are we supposed to do now? I lifted my gaze slowly, trying to find something inside myself that didn't feel shattered. I honestly don't know. She took a careful step in my direction, then stopped halfway. Like she was afraid coming any closer would push everything over the edge. I don't want us to fall apart, she said. I don't want to lose you. You didn't think you might lose me when you handed him a key? I asked. Her eyes filled in an instant. I wasn't thinking about consequences. I told myself it wasn't crossing a line, even though I knew it was. Her voice broke that time, and she pressed her fingers to her forehead like she was holding herself together by force. I was selfish, she said. I thought I was handling everything quietly, but all I was doing was avoiding the truth. Well, I said softly, the truth's here now. We let the silence settle again, thick and heavy, shaping the room in a way I couldn't undo. She didn't reach for me and I couldn't bring myself to reach for her. We just stood in the same house with two completely different versions of the last few months. Much later, when she finally walked down the hallway to our bedroom, she paused once like she wanted to say something else. But whatever word she was searching for never came. She closed the door behind her gently, almost respectfully, as if the act itself might soften the damage. I didn't follow. I stayed in the living room, sitting on the edge of the couch with both hands clasped together like I needed to hold on to something or risk falling apart. The door across the room seemed too familiar now, too marked by what had happened. I kept replaying the moment he'd walked in, how sure he was, how natural he looked crossing that threshold like he'd done it before. He hadn't expected to find me awake. He'd expected her. And that quiet certainty in his steps, that was what kept hitting me hardest. He wasn't sneaking in. He wasn't confused. He wasn't mistaken. He thought he belonged. And she was the one who made him believe that. I leaned back against the couch and stared at the ceiling. My chest ached in a slow, steady pulse that didn't ease even when I told myself to breathe deeper. I wasn't even sure if I felt anger or heartbreak, or some exhausted combination of both. By the time the sun pushed through the blinds, I still hadn't slept. The room looked different in daylight. Not better, not worse, just stripped of excuses. Everything was out in the open now, and I had no idea where the first step forward even was. One thing stayed clear though. Clear in a way that hurt. When someone else uses a key that should only fit into your life, something shifts permanently. It doesn't matter how many apologies are given, or how many explanations follow. Because once a door opens like that, you can close it again, but you never forget who walked through it. And you never forget that they weren't supposed to.